Happy Friday. Woo! Man, I feel good to be back. Oh my gosh. You know what? It has been a month. A long freaking month. But boys and girls, guess who made the return this morning? I am bright-eyed and bushy-tailed here in the 573. Happy Feel Good Friday, Columbia. Hope everyone is having a fantastic week thus far. You're listening to the Breakfast of Champions here on KCOU 88.1 FM, the student voice from Mizzou Athletics. And it gives me great pleasure in introducing Mr. Brandon, a.k.a. the B. Scott. Anthony, Brandon, happy freaking Friday, bro. Woo!
Man, these listeners must have been kind of scared hearing your voice. It's been so long. But hey, good to have you back, man.
I like to keep the energy up, you know? Yeah. When they're blaring it in the Student Center, I hope they're blaring it loud. But, it's great to be back. Great to be in front of the mic. I know that Ryan's not here today. Obviously, he's been ill. So we give him best wishes, keep him in our thoughts. But, Brandon, just like old times, we're going to kick it old school. But it's with a little bit of a twist. Typically we do have 3 co-hosts, and today we pretty much get the pleasure of getting another co-host as Mr. Usayd Koshul. Now, let me just give you a little bit of background before I bring him on, because Usayd, you deserve this, man. He is a contributor for so many outlets. I'm talking 247 Sports. If I'm not mistaken, it's the Windy City fan-sided, right? And it's the Windy City or FS on Twitter, right? That's where you can find him and follow him, Usayd?
Those are the exact ones. I also do a lot of work for Bear Report, and then I do the Picks for Face podcast with Bear Report as well, which is all about college football and the NFL draft. So that's kept me busy because I'm doing about 2 shows a week now for that. And then I host the Barely Hibernating podcast as well, which is just another fun Bear show that I do. So really 5 days a week, I'm locked into the sports stuff on top of all the other stuff that I do.
And yes, indeed, and rightfully so, man. You've got yourself quite the portfolio. And to all my Bears fans out there, hell, all my NFL fans out there, if you want to go ahead right now, go over and subscribe the Barely Hibernating podcast. It is on Apple Podcasts. You guys on Spotify, iHeartRadio, all those mediums, I'm assuming, anywhere you get podcasts.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Well, make sure you guys go like and subscribe, and that gives me great pleasure in introducing Mr. Usayd Koshul joining us live, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. How you doing, Usayd?
I'm doing well, man. How are you? Thanks so much for having me on. I know we've been talking about this for a while, so it's exciting to see the time finally get here. I'm
excited, man. We are 14 days away from what should be Christmas. Like, it needs to be Christmas 2.0 on the calendar. And, guys like you, guys like me, guys like Brandon, guys like Ryan, it is something that we celebrate and we love all too much, maybe a little too much. Dedicate our time to it in our efforts. And man, without further ado, we just got to get into this news and everything that's trending around the NFL. I want to start, though, in the best fashion possible. Let's get your feet wet. Let's start with the Chicago Bears, because there are a lot of things to talk about. And actually, it just segues into the topic of Justin Fields, because if I'm not mistaken, there was a certain guy that was in attendance at Justin Fields' second pro day, which I believe took place on Wednesday, and that guy was Mr. Ryan Pace, who also serves as the GM of the Chicago Bears, if I'm not mistaken, right, Usayd?
So it was actually head coach Matt Nagy
Sorry.
caught in one of the Ohio State pictures that the Ohio State official football Twitter tweeted, yes. And he was actually standing to the left of Kyle Shanahan, and at first there were a couple pictures of Shanahan, so I didn't know if the Bears had actually sent anyone to the pro day, and then all of a sudden it's like you see this picture of Nagy floating around, and I stole it off the OSU Twitter. I tweeted it ASAP, and I'm like, hey, Matt Nagy's at Justin Fields' pro day, and I think the implications of that show, okay, the Bears have seemingly been at every single quarterback's pro day this year. I mean, had a representation at Florida. I'm sure they sent someone to, whether it was a scout or a coach, to Texas A&M for Kellen Mond, Davis Mills all the way in Stanford. It was reported that the quarterback's coach, John DeFilippo, was there. They were caught at Trey Lance's pro day at North Dakota State University. I believe that was sometime in March. You look at that, and the implications are now Matt Nagy's at Justin Fields' second pro day, and they were at the Alabama pro day too. Nagy being at this second pro day kind of signals that the Bears are doing their homework extensively on quarterbacks. And it's not just the GM that's doing the homework. It's everybody in the front office that's involved, the coaches, the scouts. So really, the Bears are, I think, gearing up for a quarterback run. And in about 2 weeks here, we're going to have our answer, because 2 weeks from today, it's going to be the second and third round of the 2021 NFL draft. And I think that the Bears, they're going to have a quarterback on day one, and it's going to shake some things up because they operate by the element of surprise.
Well, you bring up a good point in talking about, speaking of quarterbacks, you did right for the franchise. I guess this is from the outside looking in. I don't know what your opinion or stance is, but, Mitchell Trubisky going to Buffalo. Then the question marks loom because you actually compensated or settled for bringing in a guy like Andy Dalton, who, albeit he brings in veteran, a veteran tangible. He's got that leadership. He's been around the NFL for quite some time, but people argued that Mitchell Trubisky was just about the same caliber of quarterback that Andy Dalton was. How did you feel about that direction that the Chicago Bears took? And, does that motivate, do you think it stops there? Do you think that gives you even more reason to go after a quarterback come April 29th?
My personal feelings were I kind of expected something like this to happen. I mean, if you've been following my work, you realize that January, February, March, when we were talking about quarterbacks on both the shows, I was like, hey, your quarterback for the Bears in 2021 week one, the starter could be someone like a Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson, which Watson's a completely messy situation. But I was like, could be someone like Wilson or Watson, or the drop-off could be so significant that it could be a guy like a Marcus Mariota or an Alex Smith or in Andy Dalton. And no disrespect to Andy Dalton, because the guy's played in this league at a high level for a really long time. Yeah, he hasn't won any playoff games. Yeah, he's never been the guy to kind of elevate his team. But when you look at his time in Cincinnati, I think it was the 2015 season where they started off like 6-0 or something. I mean, the guy's played some pretty solid football for the most part. And so for the Bears, this was a move that was just settling about, hey, what do we think is good enough? And let's talk the familiarity aspect of it. So I think when you look at the Bears and the way that they've operated at quarterback under Matt Nagy, they've always wanted to have at least one veteran quarterback that's worked with the coaching staff in the past in the room. You look at 2018, Nagy gets here. What did they do that offseason? They signed Chase Daniels and Tyler Brake. Nagy worked with both of them in Kansas City. You keep the same room in 2019. 2020, what do? You go out and you trade for Nick Foles as competition for Trubisky. Why? Because Foles had worked with Nagy. He had worked with John DeFilippo, and he had worked with the offensive coordinator, Bill Lazor. Fast forward to the 2021 offseason, you bring in Dalton, who's had a history with Bill Lazor, right? Mm-hmm. When we look at that, we realize the familiarity is a major aspect of it. And then I think here's why a quarterback move is on the way to answer the second part of your question. Yeah. 2017, Pace signs Mike Glenn in free agency, says, hey, Glenn, you're the starter. A month later, drafts Trubisky. 2019, doubles down on Trubisky being the starter going into 2020, right? Trades for Nick Foles. 2021, kind of doubled down on Andy Dalton being the starter, which means that the dominoes are lining up to the point where the Bears are probably trading up for a quarterback. It's just going to be a matter of who they trade up, because I don't see them trading up for Mac Jones. I do see them trading up for a Trey Lance or a Justin Fields, because those two fit what Matt Nagy's trying to build on the offense much better than a guy like Mac Jones.
Brandon, I know you're antsy to get in on this quarterback question. See, I know you got questions, man.
Yeah,
go ahead, fire away.
Usayd, first of all, Brandon, nice to meet you. I do have a question regarding just kind of what's kind of like the feel around Chicago, because I know, like, all the Bears fans I'm around are kind of pissed off and not expecting much from Ryan Pace, and I keep telling them, kind of don't worry. Maybe you'll get a quarterback in the draft. Maybe you'll trade up. So what's kind of like the fan base's mood going into the draft? Kind of. That's what my question was.
That's a good one.
You see, it's interesting. I would say exciting, but people are also tempering their expectations, because you have this one faction of Bears fans that are like, oh my God, they're at Justin Fields' pro day. They were at Trey Lance's pro day. The reality of the situation, which means they're trading up for a quarterback. But then you have this other half of the fan base that's just like, hey, don't trade up for a quarterback. build up the rest of the roster, and then draft a quarterback in whatever 2022 or 2023 when you don't have all these limited resources. Really, it's kind of a split, but people are still excited just because the thought of getting a guy like Justin Fields, or even though he's going to be like a 2-year project in Trey Lance, that really excites some people. So I would say tempered expectations, but people are still really excited.
I got it.
You got another one?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Who do you see as a team that's kind of that you think Chicago might pull a trade off with in order to get in position to draft Justin Fields or Trey Lance if one of them falls?
I'm actually going to go with the Atlanta Falcons, and I've broken down Matt Ryan's contract extensively on the Bear Report, and I mentioned how, hey, listen, Matt Ryan, if the Falcons move on from him in 2021, he's got a dead cap hit of $65.4 million. In 2022, that decreases to $40.5 million. Really, the Falcons are kind of locked into Matt Ryan's contract, and he's like, 36, 37 years old, but they're locked into his contract for at least another 3 years. And then you see the reports of Terry Fontenot, the general manager, as well as Arthur Smith. And then you hear some chatter in the background to the head coach for the Falcons that they're clearly split on what to do. And they only have so many days to come to a consensus. And if you're Atlanta, you do want to trade back with a team like the Bears, knowing that, hey, we have to go through our own rebuild, but the Bears picks for the next couple of years are likely going to be higher picks anyway. And so we should just use those picks because they need to start thinking of a post-Matt Ryan future, post-Julio Jones future.
We're speaking with Usayd Koshul of the Barely Hibernating podcast. He's also on the Windy City fan sided. I mean, so many credentials here on KCOU 88.1 FM. So Usayd, he talks about the trades, but let me give you a hypothetical here because I've been doing some research on the Bears as of late, and I was preparing for this conversation last night. Theoretically speaking, if they were to stay put at where they're at right now, which if I'm not mistaken, you guys have pick number 20, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so if you were to say at pick number 20 and you weren't to make a move up the board and we'll just stay put on Thursday night, I've seen a lot of mock drafts that have had you stay put, addressing the offensive line. I know a couple of departures have kind of put you back in the cornerback room. Obviously, Kyle Fuller, the Denver Broncos kind of stole that from you guys, and I'm sorry. But there was also Buster Skrine, who's a free agent. So a couple of cornerback departures. Could you see potentially them staying put at 20 and addressing maybe a position of need such as the offensive line or anywhere on the offensive line and or the cornerback position?
I do, but I also don't. And I'll start with why I do first. I do because you look at this offensive line class, it's one of the deepest that we've seen in the last couple of years. I mean, we had 4 first-round tackles go last year. I would argue that this year we're going to see probably 4 or 5. So just about the same amount go in the first round. I think that when you're the Bears, you realize you don't have a lot of offensive line talent coming up the pipeline. Yeah, you had 2 undrafted free agents in Sam Mustafir and Alex Bars. Both Notre Dame guys kind of emerged late last season, but you can't really guarantee that both those guys are building blocks going forward. So what do? You go out and you add some first-round talent. Now, I also don't see the Bears selecting an offensive lineman in the first round just because when you look at Ryan Pace's drafts historically, he's drafted offensive linemen in the second round. Both guys have been James Daniels and Cody Whitehair, who James Daniels I think has allowed like 1 sack and like 3,000 snaps or something. And then Cody Whitehair, who's kind of played center and left guard since the Bears drafted him back in 2016. And I think this offensive line class is deep enough to the point where the Bears really – they can find a quality starter in the second round as well, but you also have to add this element into the whole thing. Every single first-round pick that Ryan Pace has had, and this is the first-round pick Chicago's had since 2018 because of the Khalil Mack trade, every first-round pick that Pace has had, he's tried to trade up for, or he's tried to trade up with. So in 2015, the Bears were picking at 7. What does he do? He's trying to move up for Marcus Mariota. That didn't work out. In 2016, the Bears are picking at 11. What does he do? Moves up 2 spots up to 9 with Tampa Bay, grabs Leonard Floyd. 2017 moves up 1 spot and grabs Mitch Trubisky. 2018, there were reports of the Bears. They were picking at 8th overall, and they tried to trade up to grab a certain player. That deal didn't materialize, so they stood pat. And then they actually tried to trade back into the first round to grab a guy like Calvin Ridley or a guy like DJ Moore. No first rounders in 2019 or 2020. And so really this 2021 first round, it's the latest that Pace has ever had in the first round. And so, yeah, there are going to be some limits as to how much he can move up, but you can kind of surpass those limits based on just how much draft capital of the future Pace is willing to sacrifice. But to go back to the original question, I think it's just total toss-up at this point because you never know with Pace.
Yeah. Well, I will ask you this. I got a couple more questions before you go. So one question here, actually, really, no, I'm going to put you in the shoes right now. Usayd Goodell is what I'm going to call you. The pick is in for the Chicago Bears now, be it they trade, be it they stay put at 20. I got a sounder here. Here you go. Who are the Chicago Bears taking with their pick in the 2021 NFL Draft? Usayd, go right ahead, Commissioner.
With the 20th overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Chicago Bears select Tevin Jenkins, offensive tackle, Oklahoma State University.
Okay. All right. And I've seen him connected to the Chicago Bears plenty of times. I mean, I was looking on Fansided, and then I went to a couple of the other Bears outlets, and I've seen Tevin Jenkins. Tell me a little bit about him. What makes him stand out among the offensive tackle position, especially how he fits the Bears.
Really, I think it's just the aggressiveness that you have that he brings to the position. That's just the biggest overall thing. I mean, I see a big, strong physical athlete. I see a guy who's got a really strong anchor. I see a player overall that you can build around for the next 10 to 15 years. And I think just looking at Matt Nagy's offense, considering with where they're at, I mean, they don't really have a solution at the right tackle position right now because, Jermaine Ifedi was brought back on a one-year deal, but Ifedi's going to be more of a depth piece than anything. I think Jenkins fits in perfectly with what the Bears are trying to do in terms of this West Coast spread RPO style of offense. And I think that when we look at the other side of the offense, you have Charles Leno Jr. there. The guy's been a regular starter since 2014, but for him, he's been good, but not good enough. And so really Jenkins would step in and just take this unit to a whole nother level.
Awesome stuff, man. Oh, real quick, do you got another question? I know you're antsy. You were excited for this. I'm sorry. I've been keeping the conversation going. Brandon's got some questions.
You're all good.
He's excited. He's excited.
I'm blanking on my question, though, however. I just thought of one.
You got anything as far as the quarterbacks go? I know that your team's right there with the quarterback conversation and everything. 49ers fan.
What I was thinking, Usayd, is so you think that the Bears are going to stay put at 20 is what your personal opinion is? You don't think they're going to try to trade up?
Yeah, so my personal opinion is they should stay put at 20, but the analyst inside of me tells me, hey, a trade up is coming. And obviously I'm going to believe the analyst inside of me more than I'm going to believe like the fan in me, just because, again, like I get paid to publish and write and do the podcast that I do. Ultimately, I think what's going to happen is, they are going to trade up just because you realize, like, with the way that the NFL is trending, I mean, teams have made it very apparent. And the Bears were also kind of the team that set this whole thing into motion, just the element of surprise so that you weren't going to trade up for a quarterback till draft day. Because if you look at 2017, no one knew that the Bears were going to trade up for Trubisky. And then all of a sudden that sets off a ripple effect because now you have Houston and you have the Kansas City Chiefs. They're trading up for Mahomes and Watson. Then 2018, what do you have? You have the Jets who pull off a trade, move up for Sam Darnold. You have the Cardinals who move up to grab Josh Rosen. By surprise, the Bills, they just crept up the draft board because Buffalo had 2 first-rounders that year, and they take Josh Allen. 2019, all right, we didn't see any trade-ups. In 2020, no trade-ups, but still, NFL teams are still willing to continue to just be aggressive. And if it means sacrificing a year or two worth of draft picks to get a quarterback, that's going to help them win for the next 15, 16, 17 years. You do it. And you do it because quarterback's a position where teams have shown, and the Bears are another great example of this, you get everything but the quarterback position right. And then all of a sudden what happens is you're mired in mediocrity until you decide to just blow the whole thing up. And you really only get a chance to select a quarterback in the top 5 like once every like 15 to 20 years, let's say. Otherwise, really what's happening is it's like unless you're just consistently bad, then yeah, you get more and more chances. But really, right, for a team like the Bears, I mean, they only get this chance once every like 15 years almost. And right now the team's in win now mode, which means I think they're going to trade up. It's just a matter of who do they trade up for.
Yeah, I gotcha. I have one more question too, and it is surrounding, as Keegan said, I am a 49er fan, so I want to hear your input based on where we stand, because we're at 3. We traded up all the way from 12, gave up quite a bit of capital. Who do you think we're aimed to draft at 3? And are you on kind of this whole Mac Jones kind of train like the rest of all the analysts that I've been hearing all over ESPN and stuff like that?
I think they're going to go with Trey Lance. And Trey Lance, I know, is a bit of a toss-up because, yeah, he's a one-year starter. But I think we have to understand something with Trey Lance is that the opinions surrounding him would be so much better, or they would be way more different had he actually had a full fall season compared to some of these other guys. And I think that, take a guy like Mac Jones, for example. Mac Jones is really he's been like, a starter for a year and a half at this point.
Yeah.
Most guys that are one-year starters, yeah, they don't make it in this league, but then situation matters. And I think the 49ers right now have one of the most stable situations, as well as the smartest head coach and GM pairings in the NFL with Lynch and Shanahan.
Yeah, for sure.
I think ultimately you look at that and you realize that San Francisco, I don't think they're really interested in Fields just because there hasn't been a lot that's floated out there. Okay, you know what? Like, the 49ers are legitimately interested in Fields. And here's why. Because, yeah, Kyle Shanahan was at Justin Fields' pro day yesterday. But we also have to understand one thing, is that teams do homework. Anytime you have a team that moves up that high, right, you're doing your homework on all the prospects and as many prospects as you can. Simply, one, because it's the way the draft works, but number two, because let's just say a team leaps in front of you to grab a guy like Justin Fields, which we know isn't going to happen, or we know that a team could possibly be trading up for a guy like a Trey Lance. You want to know the tendencies of that player, everything about that player, and have all your research done, because you know that some way, somehow, another team moving up indirectly impacts you. So with the 49ers, I would honestly say it's going to come down to either Lance or Fields. I kind of lean Lance at the moment just because, I mean, he just seems like a better fit for the 49ers offense, especially because Shanahan utilizes Kittle so much. And from the offense that Trey Lance came from, I mean, they ran some 2 tight end sets heavily there at North Dakota State. Regarding Mac Jones, listen, Mac Jones to me is a second rounder. He's just going to be an above average starter. All right. I have had Mark Schofield on my shows in the past, and Schofield's kind of compared him to guys like Joe Burrow in the sense that he's done some Joe Burrow-like things this year, but he's not necessarily a carbon copy of Joe Burrow. I will say Jones should be going mid to late first round, but teams are always going to overdraft quarterbacks. So he's going to go in the top 10 picks for sure. I mean, listen, just look at the history, right? Teams are always going to gamble on quarterbacks. The Giants gambled on Daniel Jones 3 years ago at this point with the 6th overall pick, and everyone thought that that was not a strong quarterback class. And then the Bills 4 or 5 years ago at this point, they took Josh Allen with the 10th overall pick, or it might have been the 15th overall pick, and a lot of people saw Josh Allen as being a guy that was a third rounder. I mean, the Bears took Mitch Trubisky with the 2nd overall pick 5 years ago, and yeah, that didn't pan out, but again, you roll the dice on a quarterback because you only get so many opportunities to draft one, and if you get it right, you're going to look like a genius. If you get it wrong, well, everyone's going to be fired, but it's the NFL, and no one in the NFL, you can't be in the NFL but not take risks.
That's facts.
That is facts.
That is facts. He is Mr. Usayd Koshul. You can find him and follow him on Twitter, and it's at Usayd Koshul, USAYDKOSHUL. Perfect. All right. Find him and follow him on Twitter. He's the man with many titles. He's a Bears insider of many other things. Usayd, thank you for getting up so early in the morning with us, my friend. It is always great talking to you, and I just wish you nothing but the best, man. Anytime you want to come back through, we always love the conversation, so we appreciate your time, man.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, and best of luck with the rest of the show.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it, man.
thank you. So, with that being said, On the other side of the break, coming up in a moment, we're going to be talking about, we were going to do in honor of the draft coming up and all that stuff. We were going to end up doing, our top 5 most blockbuster trades. But Usayd's presence got me thinking and got me inspired. I think we talk about our hypotheticals in the draft and what we should expect. And we should start our conversation with the quarterbacks because there are a lot to choose from. So when we come back, 2 teams that are deprived of quarterback talent, sorry, Drew, but
sorry,
both
Jimmy, but
sorry, Jimmy. It's you know what? It's doggy dog world out there. When we come back, we're going to be spitting hard truth about our team and what we should be doing in the draft, or at least what our team should be doing. So do not go anywhere. You are listening to the Breakfast of Champions on KCOU 88.1 FM, the student voice for Mizzou Athletics. We'll be right back. That's the type of mood I'm in right now. I just got to let it keep going. How you feeling?
Man, I'm feeling this beat.
Ooh. You're listening to the Breakfast of Champions, where we, keep it lighthearted. This is the Breakfast of Champions, once again on KCOU 88.1 FM. Big shout out to Usayd Koshul for joining us at the beginning segment. We were cutting it up, talking the draft, talking Chicago Bears, and everything in between. And the man was spitting facts, and as the kids say, keeping it 100. I'm done with the slang. All right, so as we continue with the draft talk, I just love this beat, man. I don't even know what it is. I love it. We wanted to go ahead and keep with the theme. Now, typically, I guess, what we were originally planning on doing was we were going to go down our top 5 favorite blockbuster trades to ever happen in NFL history. And obviously there's a plethora to choose from. I mean, Herschel Walker, as of recent, the DeAndre Hopkins trade, John Elway with the Baltimore Colts in 83, so many. But instead, we are going with the mock draft style. And as Brandon and I have done a little bit of research, Brandon's actually looking up some mock drafts as of recent, some trending ones, to kind of see where our teams are headed, what direction they're going to be going in. And Brandon, I'm going to let you have the floor first because I know this topic is both near and dear to us, but you have a number 3 pick and I've got a number 9 pick. So with that number 3 pick, let me go ahead and call you Commissioner Brandon Goodell, and the pick is in for the 49ers. Where do you think your San Francisco 49ers are going to be going with that 3rd overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft?
Right now, Keegan, I have a feeling it's going to be Justin Fields. Ooh. I think that's where we're going. Just kind of seeing Justin Fields' pro day the other day. A picture of Fields and Shanahan sort of went viral of him chatting with Shanahan, at his pro day. And I know, it's just pro day. You can't really judge. Yeah. Justin Fields hanging out with the coaches as a sign that they're going to draft him at 3. I just think Shanahan was a mentor for Justin Fields back in the day in terms of the QB collective. Mm-hmm. Kind of coached up Justin Fields a little bit in high school. So they know each other fairly well. And I think basically trading up from 12, I think you obviously had someone in mind that you're going to go after. And I'm not buying into this whole Mac Jones, discrepancy. Mm-hmm. That's why I talked to Usayd about it when he was on. Yeah. But I think now, after kind of, Justin Fields' pro day and seeing that picture of Shanahan and Fields, I think more analysts are starting to kind of backpedal the fact that maybe San Francisco will go in a different direction than Mac Jones with the 3 pick. And I think people got to remember that I keep hearing with this whole Mac Jones ordeal, people are like, oh, he's similar to kind of Matt Ryan. That's kind of the quarterback Shanahan's had in the past. That type of quarterback.
Kirk Cousins.
Prototype. Kirk Cousins, Jimmy Garoppolo, Matt Ryan, all guys who are just traditional pocket passers, not really mobile, not really able to move. My thing is, Shanahan did. I feel like people forget that Shanahan did have Robert Griffin III, RG3. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, it didn't work out because he got injured, but that was more on his dad than him when he was in Washington. But I think if Kyle's the smart guy that I think he is, which I think he is, he's in a division with Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson,
now Matthew Stafford.
Yeah. All those guys, can be mobile, especially Kyler and Russell. I mean, his defense has to go up against those guys 2 times every year. And, he lost the Super Bowl to Patrick Mahomes, who's in that category as well. I think he spoke in his presser, too, not that long ago, when right after they made the move up to 3. And he basically said, he's like, there's two things I look for in a quarterback. Number one thing I look for is their pocket presence, how good they're in the pocket. Mm-hmm. The second thing is, it'd be nice to have them be able to make off-schedule plays or whatever as well. But he said the number one thing is his pocket presence, and then if he's able to extend outside of the pocket and make off-schedule plays, that's also something he'd be interested in. So he is interested in that type of quarterback from my eyes, and I think he's going to go more of the mobile route. I think he's done with these guys that just stand around in the pocket and try to make plays. He's dealt with it 2 years with Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he wouldn't have traded up from 12 to 3 to kind of get another stereotype Jimmy Garoppolo type of quarterback in the draft. I think his plan is to get someone that is more mobile and can make things more tough on the defense, that can also sit for a couple years behind Jimmy Garoppolo as well. So
I think, and I'm gonna throw 2 things at you. The first thing, you talk about them trading up from 12 to 3. I think it is super, super controversial, albeit Justin Fields had a good go of it. I mean, you see the leadership, you see the intangibles. As Usayd put it, there are a lot of facets that go into examining, all these players, especially when you have a number 3 pick. You want to be able to examine everything about the player that you're investing in. And Justin Fields, one big thing that I take away from his leadership, I applaud him for kind of leading the way for the Big Ten to be able to get back into contingency for the 2020 season. Remember, he led the way of the "We Want to Play" campaign and or "Let Us Play" campaign, and kind of got Ohio State back in the mix. The Big Ten as a whole was a part of that. He was a key cog. But also, then I look at kind of studying him. It's kind of studying Ohio State quarterbacks as a whole. You go back to Cardell Jones, J.T. Barrett, and Dwayne Haskins. Historically, quarterbacks as of recent have not made it, especially from Ohio State. Same could be made for Alabama quarterbacks. Last quarterback that was in the league that actually had merit was A.J. McCarron, if I'm not mistaken.
Joe Namath was probably...
Oh, yeah, well, even before then. That was like 7 years ago. Yeah. But, I mean, we're talking just like 5 years ago. It is difficult to find good quarterback talent from the 2 colleges in which just so happen to be connected to San Francisco at the number 3 spot. So either way you look at it, what I'm saying is San Francisco is going to have a lot of controversy tied to them, no matter which direction they go. But, I mean, as a fan, because as Usayd also put it, there's a fan and analyst side, what puts him up there with the 49ers for you personally than, say, Trey Lance, who actually has the same quarterback coach as Justin Fields? Obviously Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, you might as well just kiss them goodbye to 1 and 2. But what does this, what does he sell you on? What do you like about Justin Fields as, the player, tangibly and intangibly?
What I like about him is just mainly just his demeanor on the field. Mm-hmm. Nice and calm and present, collective. He also has a pretty big arm. I think we've seen that in both of his pro days. And just the fact that he's played in big games, experience goes a long way for me as well as a fan, considering which quarterback we're going to draft. Trey Lance has kind of the same skill set, and I think has a skill set that can match great with Shanahan as well. My only problem and fear with Trey Lance is just his lack of experience. He's had 1 season at NDSU. And I don't think he's more of a project than Justin Fields. Justin Fields been in big games. He's played Alabama. He's played teams. He's been to the national college football playoff and been in that type of atmosphere. I think that's more what I like about him versus Trey Lance is just because he's kind of been in that before. He's played against tougher competition. Trey Lance is playing in the Missouri Valley Conference for football. It's a lot easier competition, and I know we had Carson Wentz is in the league, had some great seasons with Philadelphia, but I just like Fields because of experience, his arm, his just kind of demeanor on the football field. My only concern with Justin Fields, I would say, is kind of his ability to read the field. I think is what a lot of people are knocking him on. Yeah. Just because he kind of takes a little bit to figure out what read he has to do. I think which can be corrected at the pro level. I think if you give him some time, which is why I think they should keep Garoppolo, for a year to kind of give Fields or whoever they bring in there kind of time to kind of process the NFL game, stuff like that. And the fact that he's from Ohio State, that's obviously concerning. You look at Haskins, he didn't work out. You look at every other Ohio State quarterback drafted, they didn't work out. Same with Alabama. We'll see how Tua Tagovailoa turns out with Miami. But, I think at the end of the day, you can't let, past history kind of keep you away from drafting a specific player. And it just so happens that both players are from Ohio State and Alabama that are both linked to the Niners. So.
Yeah. Oh my God, you guys are a controversial team.
It's kind of a crapshoot, if I don't say so myself. Besides Trevor Lawrence, honestly, Zach Wilson, I have my doubts too as well. So,
look, honestly, you guys have it made because as you progress throughout the board, you guys made the. We're going to have to wait until Thursday, April 29th, to actually declare you guys made the right move for your guy. Some people, it'll be different sides. People will have their arguments and everything. But what I'm saying is past 3, that's where you typically see a lot of crap go down. So grab your popcorn because at the 4th pick, then it's the Atlanta Falcons. And some might say, they're going quarterback. If Trey Lance doesn't go 3, then Trey Lance is going to go to or hypothetically, if Zach Wilson's still on the board, which slim to none chance given that the Jets are there, but the Jets were also in attendance to just about every other quarterback.
I'm not so sure that Zach Wilson is as much of a lock as people are making it seem like.
See, there's a lot of people shaking things up. Well, actually, it's funny that you bring that up before we get into this conversation. So Chris Sims on the Adam Schefter podcast that last Saturday talked about how Trevor Lawrence is in fact not better than Zach Wilson. I have that soundbite here, and I'll play it real quick, and I'll stop it. Then we're going to try to zoom through this board so I can get to that 9th and 10th pick, but we'll go through the 10 picks. Anyway, Chris Sims talking about Zach Wilson, how he's better than Trevor Lawrence. Take a listen real quick.
Well, I think, there's a lot to say about that. The first thing I'll go with that, right? Whenever you do this type of stuff, people just go, they make it about the negative aspect of it right away. Oh, well, you don't like Trevor Lawrence. What a jerk you are. How could you not like him? No, that's the first thing. It's not an indictment on Trevor Lawrence. He's worthy of being the number 1 pick. I've said that for people who would listen to my podcast and my evaluations and all of that. He's a really damn good football player. I'd love for him to be the quarterback of my football team. I just like Zach Wilson more.
So that was him on the Adam Schefter podcast, that being former quarterback Chris Sims. Now, he has called in the past, he said Patrick Mahomes would be the best of his draft class when he came out in 2017, right? And then I think he had declared not only Patrick Mahomes being the best of his draft class, but I'm trying to go down the list. Justin Herbert last year, when he came out, declared him to be the best. He said that I would take Justin Herbert over just about anybody. I think he also said Kyler Murray as well. And then, so he's got merit to what he said. In the past, it's proven well for him. A lot of people have been giving him a lot of negative static about that particular comment because Trevor Lawrence is a generational talent that you don't see very often. But apparently Chris Sims sees something different in Zach Wilson. But at that number 2 spot, I like what you say because I am not for certain about Zach Wilson. I'm not sold on Zach Wilson's talent, and I don't know if Robert Saleh is sold as well because he's seen all these quarterbacks. Everybody within the top 4 has seen all these quarterbacks. They've done their homework on the prospects.
And it's kind of funny because everyone in Niners Nation that I've seen has been kind of like, it's kind of funny because the Niners traded right behind the Jets, and the Jets got Robert Saleh, who, is like Kyle Shanahan's kind of mentor type of thing. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden...
you think there's a connection there?
All of a sudden, kind of, if Saleh wants to go one route, and he's like, well, wait a minute, why didn't Kyle try to trade with us to get Zach Wilson or whatever, and kind of second-guess himself because he knows Shanahan is right behind him, ready to pounce on whatever move he doesn't make. I feel like that might kind of play a factor into where the Jets go at 2. And I wouldn't rule out, a trade between the Jets and the Niners on draft night, flopping picks back and forth just because...
And they did it last year. They traded up one move, right? And who did
2017, 2017 with Chicago, they traded up one spot with the Bears. The Bears went Trubisky. We still got Solomon Thomas, which look how that turned out.
Different story for a different day. All right, so speeding real quick. Number 4, Atlanta Falcons on the board. This is where everything gets shaken up as far as the board goes. And it's historically how NFL drafts have gone. Now, the Atlanta Falcons, according to Adam Schefter, on April 6th, I believe Adam Schefter sent out a tweet saying that the Falcons are fielding calls for trading out of that number 4 spot. But honestly, I think if you have a big team need that I evaluated yesterday. I did some research on the Falcons, and it's the tight end position. When I look at the receptions or the receiving production from the tight end position for the Falcons, they ranked 59th, at least Hayden Hurst did, among receivers and tight ends last year. Go back to 2019 when they had Austin Hooper, who's now with the Cleveland Browns. He was the 27th ranked tight end. And so that goes to prove that they can figure in the tight end, and the tight end can have immense production. Bring in a guy like Kyle Pitts, pair him with guys like Ridley, Jones. Oh my God, Gage, you can't stop that offense. That is so much firepower, and he brings you versatility. The question is he a good blocking tight end? That's the big knock on Kyle Pitts. That's developmental for him. Going down to 5, I'm zooming through these picks to get to 9. You know why I want 9. All right, Cincinnati Bengals, Penei Sewell. That's all I got to say, because Penei Sewell at first was like right there with Trevor Lawrence. You let him slide to 5. You already have your quarterback in Joe Burrow. He just doesn't have the offensive line. Penei Sewell, shout out to my friend Jake Circus within the KCOU conglomerate. Hey, man, I think you guys get your guy. I think he said Jamar Chase, but I'm going to go ahead and say for the offensive line's sake, Penei Sewell. It's Penei. Miami, okay, now you get to a spot that potentially could have taken Kyle Pitts. Trey Lance is still on the board. Mac Jones is still there. Quarterback could be in the conversation, given the fact they want to move on from Tua Tagovailoa. Honestly, I think they end up settling for one of the receivers. I think that they give Tua Tagovailoa another year to prove himself, and I think they stick to their guns, but they go receiver, and at this point, it's a toss-up. I don't know if they would go after Devontae Smith and Jamar Chase because both respectively are phenomenal wide receivers. Both have accrued, they were at the number 1 spot. Then again, in 2019 when Joe Burrow was with LSU, literally all the LSU wide receivers were in the top 5. So this is a toss-up here. I'm going to go ahead and say Devontae Smith for conversation's sake, and Jamar Chase right past that number 6 spot at number 7. I think he could go to Detroit.
Keep in mind, Miami did trade with San Francisco to go to 12 and move back in to 6. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's quarterback also, too, to kind of pounce on someone that falls a little bit from the top 4.
At number 8, trade alert. Panthers have their quarterback, Sam Darnold. And then I think,
you skipped over 7, did you?
Oh, 7. I said Detroit. I said Jamar Chase.
Oh, Jamar
Chase.
Chase.
Said Jamar Chase goes off the board. Trey Lance is still on the board, and Mac Jones is still on the board by 8. So what do the Panthers do? Trade back. Why? Because Mr. Billy Belichick is calling on their phone, and he wants to trade up to that number 8 spot and get Trey Lance before Denver gets there. That's a smokescreen. But okay, go ahead, Billy.
Or Mac Jones.
Yeah, or Mac Jones, which honestly has been tied to him. There's your second trade of the draft right there. Patriots trade up. They're going to take either Trey Lance or Mac Jones. For conversation's sake, who do you feel like New England could most likely go after?
I'm going to go Mac Jones.
You're going to go Mac Jones?
Yeah.
I like it. Let's go Mac Jones at number 8. Then there's number 9. And I'm not even going to get into specifics because we're on time restrictions. With the 9th pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, Denver doesn't blink. They take their guy, Micah Parsons, out of Penn State. And here's why. This guy brings versatility to a second level that has not been able to cover the tight end in God knows how long. And you have to keep in mind the AFC West is stout in tight end. Okay, you lose Hunter Henry with the Chargers. I haven't really gauged the situation with the Chargers, but I look at Darren Waller, I look at Travis Kelce, and I realize that Denver, for all these past years, has been bottom 10 in covering the tight end. Like, they are horrible. That is their Achilles heel. So I am under the impression that they will most likely go Micah Parsons here, and that brings you depth at not only the inside, but the outside linebacking position. So when Von Miller departs, he's on a 1-year deal. You can put him at the outside. That's the beauty of versatility. This man is an athlete, a freak of nature, has been compared to guys like Luke Kuechly, who, I mean, maybe it shouldn't be there. There's a lot of off-the-field question marks surrounding him, but I think you give him that chance. Denver's full of controversy. That is like our middle name. So, yeah, I think we go with Micah Parsons at number 9, Penn State. Then there's – oh, go ahead.
I got something to add. It is kind of interesting. I'm looking at a mock draft at CBS, NFL.com, CBSSports.com mock draft. They have Denver moving up with the Atlanta Falcons, the 4th spot, and snagging Trey Lance. Just something to keep in mind.
You brought that up to tick me off. No, I think we roll with Drew Lock. See, Drew, I will give you a chance. And then I think they keep an eye on the Deshaun Watson situation. I know that he's in a little bit of thick water right now with what he's got going on.
Also has the Patriots trading up for Mac Jones on here, too.
Yes, trading up with who? The Panthers?
Trading up with Detroit.
Okay, all right, so even earlier. Okay, to round out real quick, like number 10, I'm going to give you the number 10 spot. What does Mr. Jerry Jones do at number 10 with the Dallas Cowboys pick? They could go corner. I like Caleb Farley.
Patrick
Surtain.
Yeah.
I like Patrick Surtain. Patrick Surtain is like the it's a name. It's a brand. I didn't like how he performed, especially in the SEC championship and in the college football playoff, the college football championship. He struggled against Kyle Pitts immensely. Kyle Pitts had his number the whole time. But overall, Patrick Surtain has had a decorated career with Alabama. And normally cornerbacks, defensive backs out of Alabama tend to thrive in the NFL. That is like their main, that's their
ingredient of success.
Yeah, that is
into the pros. Yeah,
the bread right there. So I like Patrick Surtain going to the Dallas Cowboys at 10. So that rounds out our mock draft for the first 10. Should we do the next 22 next week? Because I'm feeling excited about this. Yeah. In light of the NFL draft coming up. Big shout out to Ryan Crothers. We hope you get to feeling better, my friend. And big shout out to Usayd Koshul for joining us this morning. But hope to have Ryan back next week. Any final remarks before we get out of here?
No, not that I can think of.
Not that you can think of. All right. Well, with that being said, we're partying it up tonight in Columbia because I'm back. So it's a celebration. Hope everybody has a safe weekend. And, we'll see you next week right here on the Breakfast of Champions. You've been listening to the Breakfast of Champions here on KCOU 88.1 FM. Thank you, and have an awesome weekend.